Hi there, this is Dr. Moyer. We will be covering Qualtrics and creating a dataset in Excel on this lecture. If you recall, a few weeks ago, we created a dataset on Excel. We created a survey on Qualtrics. So we're going to go there first. Pull that up. And I know this is a little slow, and I apologize if some of you are more advanced than others, but I want to make sure not to leave anything out. So we're going to log in. The squeaking in the background would be one of my dogs who has decided, I guess, that he wants to be on the video too. Okay, so let's find the survey. No, that wasn't it, was it? Here we are. Okay. So this is the survey that we created, or I created, and had you guys fill out. And now at this point, I want to examine the data. So the first thing I'm going to do is click View Results. I'm in the survey. I'm going to click View Results. And then, let's see how I want to do this. View Reports. So it's View Results, View Reports, and I'm going to click on this initial report. And I just want to show you what you get when you do that. You can see this is age here. And so we have all those total responses. And then this is when we were looking at race, ethnicity. So in addition to giving us the percentages, which we would want for a categorical variable, we also over here get the minimum, the maximum, the mean, which we would never calculate on a categorical variable because it's meaningless. We also have the standard deviation, which we don't need. But I just wanted to point out that just because Qualtrics calculates this stuff for you doesn't mean that it is meaningful and you should report it. That's why you're taking this class, so that you understand what is meaningful and what you should report. Okay, then we had how happy are you right now? And they had to answer on a scale from 0 to 100, with 100 being the most happy. And we see the minimum was 60, and this is a continuous variable. The maximum was 93, the average was 80. That's pretty good. Most of you guys are pretty happy. And standard deviation, 9.78. We'll talk about standard deviation at another time. Then we've got gender. And again, it gives us a mean, but we wouldn't report that. If I was to report a mean, which is the average, of a 1.81 for gender when I've only got two options, what does that even mean? And, students will sometimes try to tell me, well, it's leaning more towards 2, so it must mean more females. Well, we can see there's more females, but this is how we would determine that. We wouldn't use and have to guess by having to calculate the mean. My apologies, I still have a cold. Okay. Next, we asked, have you ever been stopped by a police officer? This is categorical. We had 2 responses, yes or no. And again, we would ignore the mean down here. We see that 88% said yes, and 12% were fortunate enough to be able to say no. And then pretend that a police officer has stopped you and you are not doing anything wrong to your knowledge. And so we wanted to know how this would affect them. And they says we have 7% that said it wouldn't affect them at all. 20% they'd be grouchy. 53% would be pleasant. 20% you don't know. Categorical variable again. So we wouldn't pay any attention to anything other than the frequencies. And then we ask people in an open-ended way. And we'll come back to that another time. But this is how open-ended data will come to you. And what that means is that you've asked a question that's open-ended so that the participants can type in their response. And that's what we have here. Now, I want to download this data. So I'm going to click on Download Data. And I get this screen here, which can look a little intimidating, but it's not. I want all questions. And actually, I don't want all questions. I'm sorry. I'm going to select the questions I want. And I'm going to leave out that open-ended one. And then I am going to select, I want Excel. This is a comma separated value. Okay, so we're going to click this. And you can see up here, it's giving us the progress report, what's happening. And then you see it bounce down into the downloads. So let's open that up. Okay, this always freaks people out, but it's not a big deal. So what just happened is it put it into Excel for me. But what I need age, which is here. I don't need any of this. So I am actually going to highlight and delete. Now it's gone. I also don't need location accuracy. I don't need these two things here. Shift cells left, yes. And so then what I'm left with is the data that I do want. And I'm going to make it a little more easy to see or to read. And we'll talk about how to fix this because it doesn't come to you in a state that makes it easy to work with. I'm going to wrap text. And when you do that, it shows you all of what it says in that column. So again, that was just wrap text. And here I'm going to put 45 here instead of over 45. And then I've got a row here that's empty and I'm not really sure why, so I'm going to delete that. And then you see here they left out their age, but they answered everything else. So we'll just leave that in. That'll be coded as missing, which is fine. And then this number 3 row is also, I have one answer there. I'm just going to delete it because that's not really enough. Okay. So here's the data set. I've got what is your age? What is your primary race, ethnic identity? And we know that this is categorical and coded, so we're going to have to add what the categories are. Or the code book. So you may have to go back to Qualtrics and back to the survey. And that way you can see how you coded things. It's always a good idea to write this stuff down so you don't have to go back like I am. So white Caucasians coded 1, African American 2, white Asian equals 1, African American equals 2, Hispanic Latino is 3, Asian is 4, and then other was 5. So this becomes actually an important part of the data. You want to make sure that stands out. And let me just make this bigger. Okay. So now we know in SPSS, this would just change this for us, but we're not learning on SPSS, we're learning on Excel. And there is a way to code this. It's a little complicated. I'm not going to go over it because it's not necessary for this class. But if you had a lot of data, there is a way to code this to tell Excel to change these values, find the 3 in here, and change it to Hispanic, for example. Right now, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And I'm going to delete this because no one put anything in there. Then we've got the happiness scale. We've got gender. And again, we're going to need the code book. So we'll copy this. And the way that it ended up getting coded, it gets coded by Qualtrics automatically. Whatever's first is number 1. So male is 1, female is 2. And then I'm just going to make that red too so it stands out. Then I'm going to get rid of this. I'm not sure what that's about, but I'm going to delete it. I think if people put other, they could put another answer in, but no one answered that, so we're not going to worry about that. Have you ever been stopped by a police officer? Again, we'll need the code book to determine what these mean. And yes is 1. No is 2. Okay, and then finally, we asked, pretend that a police officer has stopped you and you know you're not doing anything wrong to your knowledge. We'll need a code book for that as well because this is also a categorical variable. And if you don't remember the discussion on categorical versus continuous, it is posted on D2L and you'll want to review that. I emphasized last week, and I'll emphasize probably every week, that the most important piece to statistics is being able to identify what kind of variable that you have, whether it's continuous or categorical. So we have for number 1, wouldn't affect you at all. Oops. Wouldn't affect will equal 1. You'd be grouchy, pleasant, or you don't know. Okay, I'm gonna make that red. Okay, so here I have the data set now. It's in Excel. Along the top, we have Q1, Q3. You might want to change those labels. I'm gonna change these. You want to make it as easy to work with as possible. And then I'm going to save this. So continue. Okay, so I've already posted like how to calculate descriptive statistics. So if you need a refresher on that, you'll want to go back to that particular lecture. But just real quickly, I am going to calculate an average. And it's saying A14 through A18, but no, I actually want right. That's not what I want to do. I'm actually going to get, first of all, a sum. So I have a missing variable here, which could be a problem. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to sum A3 through A18, and we know that there were 15 responses, but I'm missing one, so I'm going to put in a formula. That's not correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, and did the sum? No, this did not sum. I see what's happening. Okay. So now this should work. And this is probably tedious for you to watch. It's tedious to do, but it's actually, this is what statistics is all about. So it may not be the funnest and most exciting thing, but you have to be accurate, you have to be careful, and you have to double check all the time. So now I know, whoops, it's not what I meant to do. I just want to get out of here. Okay. This is the mean age. So now I have that, which is nice. And I could also calculate the frequencies for race, ethnicity, the happiness scale. I could do a mean because that's continuous. The gender, I would calculate the frequencies. So I'm just going to put that here. And put that in red. And copy it. Paste. 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 And here put the mean. So those are the descriptive statistics that I could calculate, and I would have some answers depending on what we wanted to know. Let's say we wanted to know, what the responses were. You're going to calculate the frequency on this variable to determine how many answered wouldn't affect, how many answered grouchy, pleasant, don't know. But instead of reporting the raw number, like how many actually said don't know, you'd report the percentage that indicated don't know, because that's more accurate. And so that's how you create a data set from Qualtrics when you're pulling your data over like that. Save that again. If you're just creating a data set from scratch, of course it's much easier. You don't have to deal with downloading the data, and you just enter the data into Excel yourself. And you may choose to do this if you're struggling with Qualtrics and getting it down. That's fine. It's your choice. Where you would just add your own variables. Stress scale, we'll say, from 1 to 10. And then you're just going to go in, each row is going to represent a person. And that's just like the other workbook we were in, the same thing. Each column is a variable. You'll have to code for gender. Age is continuous. Ethnicity, you'll have to code. Stress is continuous. It's a Likert type scale from 1 to 10. So the only ones you'd have to code would be these two here. And if it were me, I would add the code right on the second line, so you'd have it. And then you could start entering data on 3. So if you were entering a person here, let's say they were 32, their gender was African American, their gender was female, ethnicity African American, and their stress was 7. So that is the data for the first person that I'm entering in there. And that's how you would go through and enter the data. Not that difficult. The best advice that I can give you, though, really is to make sure that you label. And if you don't label in the workbook itself, then create a Word document and record everything you can about the labeling, so that if you get into here and you forgot what gender is and you don't have Qualtrics to go back to and check, you're going to be in a world of hurt. You want to make sure you remember and put down somewhere what 2 is. What does that represent? The same for ethnicity. That way, and I would just create in a Word document the code book and go through and indicate how you coded all of your categorical variables. That will make it a lot easier. And when it comes to running statistics, we will cover that. It's also in the Excel statistics textbook that you have. You can always go back. I typically, when I have a data set, I save the original data as its own data file. And then when I start working in it, I'll save another version. That way, if I make any fatal errors that can't be undone, or in order to be undone would mean I'd have to create the whole data set again, then I can just start over with the data set that's been untouched. And I typically will label it untouched, original data, something to that effect. So if you make a mistake, delete something, whatever, you can start over. Just a piece of advice. And always remember that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Okay? When you go slow, you go smooth. And by doing that, as you're working smoothly, you're less likely to make mistakes. And it ends up actually being faster in the long run because you're not having to go back and correct mistakes. And that is the quote that I leave you with. Thank you.